You're listening to LVB Podcast Show with your friend, advocate, and host, Alvaro.
Hi and welcome to LVB Show. My name is Alvaro and I'm very happy to be with you tonight. Well, it has been a while. For our listeners, this is going to be the first show that I upload since my last trip to New York. Lasted a month. It was very exciting and I'm going to tell you all about it very soon. If you want to be on the show, remember that you can email me at lowvisionbureau@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter. We have almost 2,000 followers on Twitter. I'm very excited about that. And you can like us on Facebook. LVB Show is the fan page. Tonight is a show that I have not done before because this is very, very new to me, and is comics for the visually impaired and blind. Something very exciting to talk about with Guy Hasson. He's the CEO of New Worlds Comics and he runs this wonderful digital comics book store for the visually impaired and blind. And so, Guy, I'm very happy to have you with us.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I read a little bit about your bio, and it seems exciting to talk a little bit about your background. Can you tell us about it?
Oh, I feel very old when I talk about my background. I've been here too long, but hopefully still young. I started out as a science fiction author. I wrote books and stories, and I also started out in the theater, where I wrote and directed plays. And about 10 years ago, I got into film when someone bought the rights to one of my science fiction stories and then wanted me to write it. And Recently, I got into comic books. I've been a comic book fan since I was a kid, but of all the storytelling mediums, I couldn't figure out how to write comics in a way that wouldn't be better either as prose or as a movie or as a TV show. And one day I just figured it out with an idea called Lost in Dreams. And if you want, I can tell you about it.
Sure, please.
Well, Lost in Dreams is basically you have a mother who's pregnant, ninth month, and a father, and she's about to deliver, so they go to the hospital, and the doctors say push, 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 and she pushes, and then the baby comes out. She has a daughter, but the doctors don't see anything. They say push. She said I push. The baby's out. But there's no baby there. They do ultrasound to check, and there's no baby in the womb anymore, and there's no baby in the room either. And the little girl was born into the dream. That's where we all go when we sleep. And in the dream, she's raised by a father, not a biological father, who finds her in his dream and thinks this is his daughter. So he raises her, but only when he is asleep. And when he wakes up, he doesn't remember his dreams. There are people who don't remember their dreams. So he doesn't know he has a daughter. And basically, what I wanted to do was to create a massive, epic Dickensian kind of story. Not Dickensian in a sad sense, but in the fact that it is a story from life to death. Of the little girl who is called Joy, and she's called Joy Shelley, and her adventures in the dream. She wants to go home. She wants to be normal, but there's a reason she was born there, and she's in the dream, and there are secrets to the dream. And so basically, what the story I tell is in graphic novel form. This means a comic book that's about 100 pages. Each episode is 100 pages, which means it comes out once every 6 months, because it takes time to do that. And each time you tell a story. Like the first one is her birth, and she's age 6, and for the first time she realizes she's actually in a dream, and she runs away from home and from her own dream to other people's dreams. And then the next time we see her, she's 9 years old, and the next time she's 12, and each time she skips 3 years ahead, and so we cover her entire life. So that can't be done in movies unless you have 30 movies you know ahead of time that you're going to do, and you can't do it in prose because the story is still too big for books, at least the way I want to tell it. So I found out how to do it in comics, and then once that was solved, I started writing other comics, and I created New Worlds Comics as an independent comic book company, because first and foremost because I wanted to do Lost in Dreams without anyone interfering. I didn't want it to be a marketing thing. You should put in more sex, you should put in more whatever, because that's what people like. So I didn't want to do that. So I set it up, and after a year and a half of being an independent, and I'm still running New Worlds Comics, suddenly an idea came to me it's for a reason, but also for no reason, just out of nowhere, about doing comic books for the blind and the visually impaired. And then the dominoes started falling in my head. Wait. Because people think comic books are just, people who read comic books usually think it's a visual medium. There's no way you can do that to a blind person. You can't do that. It takes everything out of it, but it doesn't. And so the first domino was figuring out that it should be done, and then how it could be done, how to tell a story in a way that doesn't lose everything but keeps everything, and then how to tell the story in a way that the descriptions don't slow the story down. And then so one domino fell after another, and in a month we had the website up. And I listened to your podcast about empowering the blind, the visually impaired, and the one thing that did cause this idea was, while I was running the site New Worlds Comics, I had a project called Comics Empower, because of all the comic books, of all the mediums that exist, comic books are consistently the most empowering. People feel empowered the most, not by books, not by movies, not by theater, but by comic books. I think it's because of the heroic nature, but I'm not sure, because it's about heroes. But so I asked fans, I asked ordinary people to tell me to tell everyone their real story about how comic books empowered them or inspired them or helped them. And, over time, we have almost 100 stories of people being empowered, and those are amazing stories. Sometimes it's a little thing that you wouldn't believe, like people consider themselves superheroes by doing good deeds. It's not that they think they can fly, but they do good deeds, and they do that because they read about heroes when they were young. And there was one guy who grew up to think he was the bad guy, and then he saw a comic book where the good guys were also complex and had more than one dimension in them, and that convinced him that he could be saved and he could become a good guy. And there was one woman who read the Indiana Jones comic books, even though those are movies first, and decided to become Indiana Jones, and she's an archaeologist who travels the world and has adventures, and aside from fighting Nazis, she did everything he did. But so it's really amazing stories, and you see a pattern emerge. There was a guy called Bill Campbell, who now owns Rosarium Publishing, and he was black, who grew up in the 70s in I forgot where in the States, but basically in a white community. And he grew up he calls it, in the land of can't, because everywhere around him people told him he couldn't do stuff. But he read comic books. His mother gave him comic books, and he especially connected with the black heroes. There weren't many, but there were a few. And they gave him the strength to believe he could do anything. And there are stories by, women who, as girls, grew up with, connecting to the female heroes, and that gave them strength to think they could do anything in life. And there are gay and lesbians who grew up, even today they also need to be empowered by looking at gay and lesbian heroes, and that gave them strength. So not only are comic books empowering, period, comic books are the most empowering when the hero is like you. So in my case, it was, I was a geeky, thin, weak kid who was beaten up and bullied, and so I connected with Spider-Man. That's what he was in his real life, and then he became something else at night. So I thought, together, when the idea to make comic books for the blind, the visually impaired, when the idea came to me, I also thought, when the site goes up, there has to be a comic book that has a blind hero, so that kids and teenagers and grown-ups can grow up and be empowered by that hero. So basically, that's what I did. I created a comic book called Aurora. That's hard to say with my accent. That's Aurora. Aurora. And it's for ages 9 and up, but if you're a teenager or a grown up, you're not going to feel it's for kids, but kids will feel that it's for them. And basically, it's in the world of mechas. It's a genre called mecha. This means giant fighting robots. So the human race, like in a few years, unearths on the moon a bunch of giant robots who are built for humans, and they were buried there thousands of years ago. No one knows why. So they carry them to Earth. And it turns out that they only activate with a human being inside them, and only a certain kind, like there's a genetic marker for certain people. So of all the people in the world, only 20 can get in and activate that massive fighting machine. And, the fact that we discovered those giant robots, which we call the Auroras, activated other robots on the moon, which started going down to Earth and trying to destroy cities. So the only thing that can destroy the evil robots, or the bad robots, which is the Auroras. Now the bad robots are the robotic. They learn from experience. They're very quick, and they never make the same mistake twice. So the human army is basically 20 people who fight them, and in the last battle, they were wiped away by the robots who learn. Everyone died except one person, Daniel Price, who had his eyes burned off. Now, he thinks he's going to retire, but he's the only one who can enter an Aurora, and the Aurora can't be activated mechanically from the outside or from the inside. Nothing electronic works inside it. It has to be a person. So now there's a new attack of the Vespers, the bad robots. And they basically say, you have to go there and fight, because we know you'll lose, because they are better than you when you could see. And you can't fight because he can't fly without seeing, and he can't shoot, he can't aim right. But you have to go there and at least put on a show, because that delays the next attack by 4 days, and that gives us a chance to find a solution. So he goes there, and he has to find a way to live. That happens in the first issue. He goes there basically to die, but of course he doesn't die. And the entire series is about him finding within himself and within what he has a way to save the Earth. And one of the rules is, because this is empowering, he will never gain his sight back. He will never find a mysterious sixth sense that allows him to compensate for what he lost. He's just going to have to deal with it. So that's Aurora. That is the story, and it is an empowering story for kids and teenagers. So, if you're a parent who has blind or visually impaired kids, this was made for them.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
To me, this is fascinating. I never heard so much, enthusiasm, and I never heard so much passion in describing comics, probably in my life. I want to congratulate you for this wonderful, empowering tool that you are now giving us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. The second you think about it, the second you see how it can be done, you think, how is it that it's never been done?
Yes. Really wish that Steven Spielberg would take this project and do it, because I think it really would be incredible. That could really capture what you are doing with this wonderful essence of your idea, understanding that the important part is to understand what you are doing in the dreams. I really love the idea that you had.
Really? I
don't know if you agree with me, but I feel in this planet we really need more people that has imagination. I think that part is very important in our society, and sometimes you feel that in music, in movies, in everything, you don't have that anymore.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. The thing about comic books, and it's mostly the usually adventure types, not all of them, but the majority. And when you read it, it makes, good ones, your mind explodes with ideas. I agree with you. I think imagination is super important, and we have to develop imagination, and we have to stop people who are trying to stop imagination. Usually you do it in with your kids when you say, stop your nonsense and stop, dreaming is silly or stupid, or, that's bad. But there are also different people with different levels of imagination, because for example, I've taught writing, and I know that there are people that, try as they might, they won't be able to have a lot of imagination. And there are people who are explosions of imagination.
That is true. And so,
yes.
I would say my biggest question right now for our listeners would be, how do you come out with this idea of comics for people who are visually impaired and blind? And how are you able to understand our community if you are not blind yourself?
Well, it is. I have two answers for that. One is that on the one hand, I'm a writer, and what I usually do is I get into other people's heads and I find out how that works, and then I write about it. For example, most of my years I've written about female, you know, not in comic books, but female heroes, female characters in the theater, especially. And when I was 24, people couldn't believe that a guy wrote this. Um, so I try very hard to be right and to do it right, and not just to um, guess, and not just to try to somehow condescend. And at the same time, it's important to know that him being blind is not what this is about. He's not saying, "Oh, why am I blind? Why is this happening to me?" That is not his story. He's trying to save the earth, and the one thing he is trying to get back is his happiness, because he lost his happiness. Because his friends died, and he's Earth's only hope, and he doesn't feel he can do it. And on the other hand, that's the second part of the answer, is that this is a journey of discovery. I don't put everything in the first issue. So I put out the first issue, and then I had people read it, and then I talked to them. And I found, I have Comics in Power now, the store, the comic book store, and I talk to people, and I find out more and more every week, and so I know more, and it is a story that's built to not contain everything in the first issue. It grows, and I grow with it, and it grows with me. But at the end of the day, we are all people, and the thing that makes us is the same. We can't think. It would be crazy to think that it is different. And so that is the main thing. It can't be actually about blindness. It isn't. It's about a man who is trying to save his world and his family. He has a family, and he's trying to survive, and he's trying to save them, and he will, through this process, discover his happiness again. Yes, that's the thing that happened to him that makes it impossible for him to win, but also makes him become a hero, because when he could see, he wasn't good enough. He lost the battle. He lost the war. Now he can't see, but now he has to win. He has to be better than, machines that are better than him, that learn faster than him, that adapt to changes and learn from mistakes, and he has to do it in a machine that flies and shoots, which he can't do anymore. So,
and is this the basic idea of a digital bookstore? Is having your own material, or also maybe have other people's material that provide their material to you, maybe, and also maybe you will have like Superman for the blind, or maybe Spider-Man for the blind in the future. Tell us.
that's a very good question, because I forgot to mention it. So that's really important. Here's the thing. So I came up with this idea, which for some reason no one thought about before. So the first thing I could do was, each comic book you put on the in the store, you have to have the rights to it. So the easiest thing for me was first to put comics books from New Worlds Comics because I had the rights to do them, and I didn't feel bad about the fact that they're my comics because they got reviews all over the web about how it's the best science fiction comic books around. So I felt okay with that. And I wanted to test the idea. I didn't want to do 50 comic books and then people would say, "What the hell are you doing? This is not how you do things to the blind. That's not how you put up a website," because the entire world was new for me. So basically, I came up with a test. I put up the website, and we had 3 comic books: Winter 1, Winter 2, and Aurora 1. And I tested it on people, and it turned out very good. The website is good, and it's very blind friendly, and the comic books, people are very happy with them. People who used to read comic books are saying, I never thought I'd read a comic book again. And people who have never read a comic book said, I talked to other people who read Winter, who saw Winter, and they said, "You sound like you know this a bit too well." So that's great. So what happens is, in the time we're recording this, next week we're coming out with more comic books. Each month there's another one of an old series and then first one of a new series. Plus, I am working on basically, if all goes well, we're going to start really growing the store very quickly. So we were testing this with comic books that I owned. Next, I'm going to use independent comic books that are the best today. And as we get more users or more customers, and we have a lot of people buying comic books, then I can go to the big comic book companies, Marvel and DC, with their Superman and Spider-Man and Batman and Avengers and all the stuff you've heard of before, and say, "Look, there's a bunch of people here who would be happy to get your books. So it's worth money to you. Just give us the rights." And then hopefully they'll either give us the rights to do it on Comics in Power, or they'll do it themselves. And in either of those cases, you win. So that's my plan. So hopefully it'll take 6 months, maybe 12 months to reach that stage where we can go to the big companies and say, "Hey, this is worth money to you. You should do it." But by that time, we're going to have a lot of comic books. The comic book store is going to grow very big, very quickly. Now that I saw that it works, and that is how you make a comic book translated into audio, and that people are responding very well to it.
So Guy,
the test worked. Now comes the next stage. Yes.
Right. That is a very, very, very good news for our listeners to know what a big plan that you have. That's wonderful, because everything is gonna get into the hands of the people that really want to have everything independent, your comics, the big companies' comics, and have access to everything. Access for all, as we always say, which we all need. Now, people...
Yes, I should just say,
sure.
I can't promise that they'll do it. I can promise that you'll have indies, that's for sure.
Right.
I can't say ahead of time what they'll do.
Sure. Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah. But you're going to go with the idea to them, which is a great beginning.
Yes.
So our listeners may be thinking, okay, this sounds great. Now, let's talk about two things. First, what is the way I get the comic book in a digital format? What is the format it comes with? And tell us about an average price of comics.
Okay, so comic books, what you do is you go to the website. It's comicsinpower.com, comicsinpower.com. And there's you click on the link where it says the comic book store, and there you see the comic books that we have today. You can listen to previews, which are usually like 3 or 4 pages from the comic book, so you know what that sounds like ahead of time, and then you choose to buy the comic books that you buy. It's a digital thing, so PayPal, I think, is the best way. I'm not sure. I don't remember how many ways there are to pay. And then once you bought it, it's usually, if you were looking at 20, most comic books are 22 pages long, plus we do the letters page. For example, we also do a letters page for Aurora, so with comments from the blind, the visually impaired who read it. But we also do the original comic book letters pages of people that read the other comic books. So it's a 22-page comic book. Usually translates to 30 to 35 minutes of audio. And what it happens is, after you buy, you get an email with links to each of the comic books that you bought. And then you click on the link and it downloads to your computer and you can listen to it. It's an MP3 file. Each comic book is an MP3 file, and a 22 to 25 page comic book is $3, which is the price of a comic book. Depends which comic book you compare it to. It's either the price of a comic book or it's slightly cheap. But if we do a big comic book that's 35 pages, or that's like Lost in Dreams, which is 100 pages, it's going to cost a little bit more. Basically, we have almost the same prices as the store.
How great! It's fascinating. You're doing so much work in making this, really accessible for the community, but you're giving really good prices for it, which is to be applauded, because you know how it is sometimes for some people, and some people tell me there are people who are trying, to make this accessible for all, others that try to make the other thing accessible for this, for that, but sometimes what happens is that the prices are too huge, and at the end it's not accessible for anybody. How do you see the world of comics in the future? For instance, I would like to know, what is your opinion about these conventions? I have some friends that they go to these conventions and they tell me that it's not very accessible. Like, for instance, the costumes, nobody describes them, and so for them it's like they don't know what is going on there, and so they would like more accessibility in these conventions. So do you see in the future this is going to be happening, that conventions are going to be more accessible for everybody?
Well, I'm not sure how inaccessible they are. I haven't been to the really big events. I've been to the smaller events. But I can tell you what I've learned just recently. One of the people I talked to, one of the fans, who is blind, he goes to conventions. And he says he's not the only blind person he finds there who goes to conventions. There's a few of them. And they just go and attend and listen. It's true, you can't see the costumes, but most of the costumes are not, they're not an official part of the conventions. People just choose to dress up. And I can tell you what I did. I was stuck. The latest convention was the big. It's called SDCC. It's a San Diego Comic-Con. That is the hugest, biggest comic book convention. And I was stuck on the other side of the world. So one of the things I did was I decided to use Periscope, which I understand that is. I was surprised to find actually that it is blind friendly, even though it's about video streaming. So basically, I I just looked at everyone who's going to Comic-Con, and I watched stuff. I watched lines, I watched booths, but I also watched some really amazing stuff that happened live. It was just like being there. And at the same time, about a day afterwards, once it was over, I've at Comics in Power, I have a daily newsletter that whoever wants to sign up, or whoever buys a comic book gets a daily newsletter, and you can unsubscribe if you want. But what it does is it sends you information about, we have more than 75 years of comic book history to catch up on. Spider-Man, I think, is 50 years old. Superman is even older than that. So every day I send 3 links about a specific subject, like Spider-Man or Superman and so on. And after Comic-Con, I found, links to panels. Basically, the entire panel is like 45 minutes or an hour of a panel that were available on the web. And I sent it to people, and basically it was like attending the best shows in Comic-Con without going. So today you can do that. Yes, and you can still find the links to that on our blog, because what I send out, it also appears in the blog. So if you go, the blog is updated almost daily, and you can go back a little bit, and you can find those links and listen to those amazing panels. There was a Star Wars panel. It's crazy stuff. Yes, the podcast is called Comics in Power, and I have to change its name because it's not about this. Comics in Power, the podcast, came from New World's Comics. It was about the path of the indie. It's like a 100% honest, behind-the-scenes look at an indie publishing company, comics company. And you can hear me in the middle get the idea of doing comic books for the blind and the visually impaired, and then do it. But it isn't the main thing that I talk about. I mention it every episode, but the thing that I talk about there is my vision for the way comic books should be, which is a completely different position to be from what I'm doing in Comics in Power, which is to give you not what comics should be, but what comics are. I want to give you Spider-Man and Superman and all the things that you've heard about. But as an indie who doesn't do Spider-Man and Superman, I want to do something else, like Lost in Dreams. So the bigger Comics in Power the website goes, the more I realize I have to change the name of my podcast. It was such a good name, and it's so true, that Comics in Power, that I had to use it for the store. But now I have to change the name of the podcast. I'm going to do that in a few weeks. I come from Israel, which is the accent you hear, and I was in the States during my teens in Tucson. And then, at age 17, I knew 2 languages, one with an accent, but still. And I could write I could write just as well in both of them. And I had to, and I wanted to become a science fiction author. So I had to decide what language should I write in. And so I decided English, because there's so many more people, that's where the science fiction is. So I started writing science fiction daily in English, and then my English skyrocketed. And the interesting thing to know is that you would think that speech and writing works from the same place in the brain, but it does. They don't. My writing ability is so much better in English. Is so much better than my writing ability in Hebrew, but my speech is so much better in Hebrew than in English. It's completely different places in your head. I'm located in Israel, which is international. Yes, but the thing is, the website is in English. It's digital. You can buy the comic books from anywhere. It doesn't matter where I'm from. You can't know that this was not written by an American citizen by reading the comic books that I write, and certainly not comic books that other people write. So there's going to be a lot of Australian comic books, by the way, which are super cool. Yes. And so, today location doesn't matter, it's so nice living in the future.
Oh yeah,
science fiction author.
Oh yeah, tell me about it, Guy. Most people don't know or don't understand that I am located in Colombia. In my podcast, I've listened in so many countries in the world, so it's really fascinating. Now, two last questions. One would be, what is your team? I suppose you cannot do this alone, right? I mean, you have someone helping you.
I'm doing this the indie way. Basically, it's me. Well, it's me doing the marketing, the texts in the thing. I don't do the voices. That's you got one of the best, some of the best, voice actors in the world doing this, and I had a developer working on creating the website, which thank goodness I didn't think I could do that alone, because I couldn't. I do the rest. I do the daily newsletter, and I'm there on Twitter talking, and today I did the sound edits for the next batch of comic books. But as we grow bigger and we have a lot more people buying comic books, I'll be able to move aside and just let other people do this, and I'll be able to concentrate on creating more comic books or bringing more comic books to you, and not doing some of for example, the sound editing.
Right. Will there be a Spanish version of this?
There are. Here's the thing. You remember I had a plan to do this and comic books, and doing this in different languages is part of the plan. But again, it does cost money, so we have to make money to do that. We have to make enough money. The first thing we do when we make money is give you more comic books. More comic books, more comic books, more comic books. Then we're going to do go in advance and be able to do a lot more stuff. And absolutely, there's no reason this should be just in English. You have many blind and visually impaired people all across the world. It wouldn't be just in Spanish. There's so many languages. We'll do this in Polish and French and so on and so on and so on.
You know why I said that? Not only because I'm Latino, but because I grew up in Spain, and it's one of the biggest countries in the world in comics, not only in people who read comics, but in the culture of understanding comics. And I can bet you that would be a great success in Spanish for the blind community there, because it's a country that loves this. They love movies, they love comics, they love theater, they love culture in general. So it's going to be very, very successful there. When they love something, they go for it deep. So that's what I wanted to tell you, Guy. It really is a great market. So
I really appreciate that. When we do it, when we make the move to Spanish, I will talk to you again. Hopefully we'll talk beforehand, but we will talk about this too.
Count on me for sure. And my final question for our listeners is, please remind us the website and an email for people to contact you on.
The website is comics, comicsimpower.com. That's COMICS, comics, EMPOWER, empower, comicsimpower.com. And the email is also easy, comicsimpower@gmail.com. And, check it out. You can listen to free previews to just check out what a comic book looks like. And if you know parents of kids or teenagers who are blind or visually impaired, remember there's Aura for them. And the last thing actually about comic books and the fact that they're empowering is also comic books are a gateway to literacy, because they're addictive, because you want to read the next one, and it's just been proven and shown, it's just true. Comic books are a gateway to literacy. Kids who don't want to read will read comic books, and that'll get them to read more stuff.
That's a great point, Guy. That is really a great point for our listeners. I really have to say that. It's an easy way into the reading world, if you wish, and into the cultural world at the same time, that we all need, and especially kids needs these days in this planet, and I think that everybody else does as well. So, Guy, has been a privilege to have you on, and I know that our listeners have had a wonderful time listening to you with so much enthusiasm. And so basically, I'm very excited about this interview, and it has been my pleasure.
It's been my pleasure. It was a great conversation. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And for our listeners, remember that you can email us to be on the show at lowvisionbureau@gmail.com. And, well, that's pretty much it. This is Alvaro from LVB Show saying good night.